Welcome to 2022 and new episodes of Story Power. This is episode 39, and my guest today is Rosie Beech, who has her own podcast, Yorick Radio Productions. She and I exchanged guest spots on each other's podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Welcome to Story Power, a bi-monthly podcast where my guests and I geek out about the stories we're passionate about in all different genres, styles, and formats. My name is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden, and I started this podcast during the summer of 2020 at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. As I watched the reaction of my friends, family, and social media circle, I noticed that many people turn to stories for comfort and help in making sense of the craziness going on around them. My goal was to do the same for my listeners, but as I chatted with my guests throughout the first year, I discovered that their personal stories were the most fascinating thing about each episode. Neil Gaiman says, "Fairy tales are more than true not because they tell us that dragons exist, but because they tell us that dragons can be beaten." I now know that sharing our experiences with others helps us defeat our own dragons. It is our stories that connect us to one another. Let's see what wisdom today's guest has to share with us. Now, Rosie Beech is my guest today, and I cannot remember what episode, so I'll have to put that before the music. But it's a pleasure to talk to you again. I was Rosie's guest on her podcast, and so welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Lucinda. It's an absolute pleasure to appear on your podcast as well.
Yes, all the way from Scotland. Oh my goodness, it's evening for you there.
Yeah, but not too late. I've just got, as I'm speaking to you, the sun is just going down over the trees and it's all very atmospheric. So it's lovely.
How lovely. Yes, that is wonderful. I wanted to know from you, I know you're a podcaster. You have two podcasts that you work on. Mm. And I was wondering how you got hooked on stories and how that relates to your podcasting.
Oh, I'm very happy to talk about that. So the podcast I run is all about stories. It's all about creativity, a bit like yours, to be honest. And that came about from my core love of fiction and stories. So when I was 6, I was definitely 6 because it happened just after my 6th birthday. My eardrums burst. It was a combination of an ear infection and altitude, sickness. Oh. And so for a very long time, I could only hear things that were, while they were healing, that was going directly into my ears. And that coupled with the fact that I was an only child, I was always badgering my mother for stories. Like, oh, please read me another one. Tell me more. And so my mum had to work, obviously. And so what she did was she bought me a Walkman. I don't know the age range of your listeners, but a Walkman tape player was a portable, well, it says what it says on the tin. It was a portable tape player. And you could plug your headphones in and listen and move around. So as a child, that was really freeing. I could run around, play, do whatever I wanted while being told a story. And I was absolutely hooked. I listened to some of the most important stories for me at that time were Harry Potter. Stephen Fry became very important voice in my life.
I love him.
Oh, he's absolutely wonderful performer. And in addition to that, I had the BBC radio adaptations of Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, all of the Narnia Chronicles, The Rats of Nim. These were some really key things in my life. And so I grew up just surrounded by stories all the time. When my parents were working, I was listening to stories. And that became the diet I was fed on. Mm-hmm. And then I reached a certain age and I realized, wait, somebody has to make these. I wonder if that's a job. So I gradually found out that this was a career. You could be a voice actor, or you could make these things. You could put them together. And I don't think I suffered for being an only child. I got a lot of love and affection and attention from my parents, my grandparents. But I think maybe being alone for a significant amount of time as a child means that you have to rely on your imagination and the imagination of others. And so listening to stories naturally led into telling your own. And storytelling was very important for me as a young child. It was my companion. Stories, fictional worlds became my friends. That sounds sad. I did have other friends, but like they were boring. Stories were interesting. And that really impacted the kinds of people I wanted to be friends with. I became friends with creatives because they could tell me stories. So I became friends with people who had ambitions to write, to create, to act, to perform. And I really got into those things as well. And so my dream became, I wanted to work for BBC Radio 4. That was my absolute dream. I wanted to create these stories that I loved so much. I wanted to be the voice actors that some other children or even adults would really enjoy. So I went through high school, university, and in my head I was thinking, I'm not qualified. I can't do this. There's so many roadblocks. Like that was what I thought. And obviously, and basically, other people tend to agree with you when you say that sort of stuff. It's like, oh yeah, no, you need to have more experience. Oh, you need to go to like acting college at least. And then I did. I went and got my master's in theatre and performance. But I slowly started to think, well, actually, maybe it's okay if I'm not the best I'm going to be. Maybe the stuff I have to say now will have some relevance, and it's fun. And why shouldn't I have fun? What's wrong with having fun?
Right.
So in 2020, I'd had the idea of a podcast. I found out about podcasting because obviously I consumed audio voraciously. Someone said, you consume so much audio, you need to get into podcasts because you are listening to more than the BBC can produce.
Yes.
So I got it. So I started listening to podcasts and I thought, this is amazing. This is like a radio show that you control. You don't have to run it through anyone. And I decided I was going to read stories. I was going to, if I couldn't find radio plays to perform in, I was going to write them myself. So, and I remember for a period of time, I thought, I can't write radio plays. I'm not a writer. Well, I'll learn as I go. So I started writing plays. I got my friends to perform in them. I performed in them myself. I started interviewing people about their creative experience and what stories and performance meant to them. And this all came together to be Yorick Radio Productions, which was a name I came up with in my first year of university. So you can tell how long I've been thinking about this.
Oh, that's great. So, now, is it Yorick of Hamlet, poor Yorick?
It is, yeah. Actually, that name came from I got really into the history of radio, and radio way back in the day used to be called Theatre of the Skull because it relied on the vibrations in your skull. So you heard things, and so and also the other metaphor there is imagination. The sounds create the imagination. They prompt you to to imagine a picture. Yes. And so I thought, okay, Theatre of the Skull. Who's a famous skeleton? Well, it works. It's a theatre. He's a jester. He's a performer, and then Shakespeare's an iconic piece of theatre maker.
That's right.
Yorick Radio Productions, and radio productions came from at the end of every single the audio tape I had. It would say, "This has been a BBC radio production." So, yeah. So I wanted to say this has been a Yorick radio production.
I love it. I love that story. That's great. So, how has it been going?
It's been so much fun. I honestly, throughout the pandemic, podcasting and drawing stories together has been a lifeline. I think I would have been absolutely miserable if I didn't have this to rely on. It also meant it was in a time when we couldn't be physically connected. I was still connecting with my friends. They were recording voice clips and sending them to me, and I was editing them together. And we were still creating stories together. We were just at a distance. And I got to make some amazing new friends and new contacts through this podcast. I was able to reach out to people and say, do you want to come on my silly little show and have fun with me? And people did, like yourself.
Yes.
And it's been so much fun. And as like you said, I feel like telling stories, that very human instinct to create narrative has been my savior for so many different reasons. It kept an only child company. It helped me articulate my own feelings. Like sometimes you don't know how to say what you're feeling until other people give you the words. And so through other people, so the fictional tragedies or happinesses of others, I found the words to say how I feel. And then on a greater level, it's just fun and entertaining. And it's a lot more interesting to listen to or tell a story than to sit in your house while a massive pandemic rages outside and do nothing.
I know, really. Yes. Yes, that's what I love about it too, is meeting all these new people and listening to their stories. I love that so much.
Oh, yeah.
So, what is your podcast? The Yorick Radio Productions podcast. Where can people find that?
People can find Yorick Radio Productions on most podcasting platforms, definitely on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. iHeartRadio is another one, and then lots and lots of. So basically, if you have a podcast app, you'll probably be able to find Yorick Radio on it.
Oh, good. And do you have a place where you have show notes or anything like that?
Unfortunately, I do not have show notes. I do have a website.
Oh, okay, good.
Which I'll send to Lucinda, and hopefully that can go in the go in the description.
Yes, because I put show notes on my website. So good. Yes, I want that. And I will include the link for Yorick Radio Productions as well. But I know you're welcome. But I know that you also have another podcast that you work on. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you. So I work for a charity called Mindwaves. They are Glasgow-based. Also for any Americans, that is how you pronounce Glasgow. But it's all about helping people with mental health. And because I think there's this idea that mental health is something that only some people deal with. But everybody deals with mental health. It's just to a greater or lesser extent. So its mission, its goal is to provide information, good news, resources for people who feel that they are struggling with their mental health, places that they can reach out to or go to find help. And I run their podcast, which is all about sharing news, information, mostly positive and good news about ideas that people have about mental health, their experiences. So very much it's a story as well. It's a personal story for each of these people. So I've had people talking about depression and how exercise helps them and the narrative of their life story through that. I've spoken to people who manage social media platforms and how that is both a very positive thing in their life and also it can be a very challenging thing for them. So the whole goal of Mindwaves is to share the experiences and stories of those who manage mental health in everyday life.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful. So send me the link for that as well.
I definitely will.
And how would Americans pronounce Glasgow? I thought you just pronounced it Glasgow.
Well, you pronounce it correctly. I've heard some people say Glasgow.
Why would
they
they
spell
say
it phonetic? Yeah, I think it's the spelling.
maybe. Oh, it's probably because I read a lot and also, I'm involved in theater. And so I know how you say it because, the Scottish play, because of the Scottish play.
The Scottish play, yes. Honestly, it's absolutely, so no hard feelings to Americans who can't pronounce Glasgow, because I mispronounce so many American town names, that it's not even funny.
Yes, right. Especially the ones that are like Native American names or Spanish names.
Absolutely beautiful languages, and I fail so hard at saying them unless somebody tells me how to say them first.
Yes, right. Or unless you've lived there and you know how to say it. Yes, right.
Oh, completely, yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, and as you say, I think stories and creativity are very frequently methods that people who struggle with their mental health, they're fantastic ways for people to learn to express themselves, and also a way to rewrite the narrative of mental health.
Oh, yes. Do you get feedback from the people who listen, and do the stories help them?
Well, so far, I've had positive feedback from. I haven't had anyone tell me, "How dare you are misrepresenting an entire group of people," which is good. I haven't had that yet, and I hope to never have that. I try to be as respectful as I possibly can, and it's very much guided by the interviewees. My job is just to help them tell their story.
Yes.
But it's so far so good. I think people have found hearing about other people with similar struggles helps them feel less alone. They don't feel like so much of an outcast or a stranger. It's like, no, you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You just need support in different ways than other people need support.
Yes.
As my mother always says, if you had a broken leg, no one would be telling you to walk it off.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. Oh, and that's so fantastic. I love that. It's one of a lot of different organizations that are out there helping people. I think that's so important. So send me the link for that as well. And because you never know, sometimes Americans are related to people in other countries. And there have to be, I know of someone here in Sierra Vista who was born in Scotland. So she and her family travel there periodically. And there may be people who were born in Scotland, have family in Scotland, who want to donate to Mind Waves.
Oh, that would be very kind of them. And definitely listening to the podcast, your geographic location, it doesn't matter. I think anyone could get anything from these stories.
Yes.
They're very relatable.
Yes. And is Mind Waves, is that another one that is on all of the podcast outlets?
Yes, you'll find it on the main ones. So you will find it on Apple Podcasts. You'll definitely find it on Spotify.
Oh, good.
And I think also on Google Podcasts. You'll find it in most places.
Okay.
And I will send you a link to their website as well for that podcast. So even if you can't find it on a platform that you use, the website should be fine.
Oh, good. Okay, great. That's fantastic. So are you reading anything or consuming anything right now that you want to tell the listeners about?
Ooh, definitely. Let me bring up my book list.
All right, good.
One thing that I listened to very recently, which I think would be very relevant for your listeners, is it's a play called Resistance by Val McDermott.
Oh.
Now you can definitely buy that on Audible. I don't know about other platforms, but you can definitely find it on Audible. It is a radio play which is all about essentially the COVID outbreak, except it was written years before the COVID outbreak.
Oh my goodness.
It's amazing. Val McDermott is a master storyteller, and this picture of a society that is falling apart under the threat of an infectious disease. It's gripping, it's heartbreaking, and it also has hope at the end. It's a story about like a classic thriller. It's told from the perspective of a journalist, as most of these stories are. Like the original War of the Worlds, that was all. H.G. Wells frequently wrote from the perspective of journalists, and it's about this woman who seems to be at nearly every point where a great breakthrough is made or a discovery is made about this disease. And she tries to track down how it started and maybe how to help inoculate people against it. So that's an amazing piece of media. The other one I would recommend is extremely silly, but also an absolutely fantastic read, is Sense and Sensibility in Sea Monsters.
Like Pride and Prejudice and zombies.
Exactly. I also love that. Would recommend that. So the book is written by a man named Ben H. Winters. And it's an absolute riot. Zombies is, while I adored Pride and Prejudice and zombies, Sea Monsters is something that's sort of fallen out of the public vogue for a while. And he's very good at meshing Austen's original text with these strange and outlandish almost early science fiction concepts of monsters from the deep that want to torment humanity, and it's absolutely hilarious. He also works in ideas of classism, and he puts much more of a lens on the way that aristocrats treated the working class back in the day. It was a double-ended sword, double-edged, apologies, because while the working class were very much considered, if you worked for a noble family, you were considered family. The servants were part of the family. However, they were also, their struggles were not considered. So the whole book, in Sense and Sensibility, the main characters complain about how poor they are, and yet they still have two servants, and they don't have to work, and they have an income of money, and so it's very. This Sense and Sensibility in Sea Monsters really looks at the dichotomy of British society during that time.
I love it. Oh, you've made two I have never read Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
I would recommend. I think I was an Austen fan, still am, and I thought, oh, zombies, how silly! Why would you want that? No, it's amazing. It's so good.
Well, I've seen the movie, but now I usually do it that way. I like to see the movie or the miniseries first and then read the book, because then the book fills in the blanks, and I have pictures in my head of people and places to go with the book. But for some reason, I have never picked up the book yet. I have it on my wish list on Amazon, but I have to go get it, I guess, because silly to me right now, I'm comfort reading. I'm reading rereading most of the books from the Cadfile series.
A wonderful series. Absolutely fantastic.
And yes, and they're just comfort reads for me, but I need that right now because I'm so busy, and I don't want to I just want to feel good when I go to bed at night to lay down to read my book.
Yes, you want to read about a nice monk who solves crimes. I agree with you. That's amazing.
Well, the thing I love about it is it's not too gory. I'm not into gory. But it's also he and Hugh Beringer, the sheriff, I think I said his name right, sometimes they allow the people who perpetrated crimes, if they're not murder, to escape, or the people that they're supposed to be, like the one I just read. This young man was a follower, a soldier in Empress Maud's army. And he happens to be in King Stephen's territory. And so they're supposed to be looking for him and arresting him. Well, Hugh and Cadfael kind of know who he is. And so they let him escape because, they don't think it's why arrest him, for following the opposition. I think maybe their outlook is more advanced than the 1100s, but
that's fair. I mean, sometimes when you're reading a fictional book, it's better to some of the older attitudes might be a little unpalatable to modern readers. So having a slightly, and to be fair, I imagine that for most people in England during that time period, there's something so daft about a civil war, you're just having to. So I imagine most people were a bit on the fence about the whole thing. It's like, we'll follow whoever the ruler is when they get crowned. We'll just go with it.
Right, exactly. Well, and the other thing I like about it is you're learning a little bit about history, about the feud between Maud and Stephen, who were cousins, and a little bit of. I love the little bit about their personalities and their flaws in their personalities, and also how whole towns got sacked. And it's the ordinary everyday people who suffer the most. And
it really is.
Yeah. So I like that part about it as well. I'm kind of, I don't know why I found this series called The Circle of Cerridwen, and it starts in the late 800s. And it's the second wave of they call themselves Danes, but we call them Vikings. The second wave of Vikings has come and taken over northern part of the continent. Of your island. And so it starts off with the main character is her father died, and then her uncle, who was her guardian, died. And so she didn't have any other family, and she grew up in the monastery. The priests and monks raised her from 9 or 10 years old or something like that. Well, now she's of marriageable age. And of course, all of her family lands went to the monastery.
I see.
So she doesn't want to get married off. She's approaching marriage age, and she doesn't want to get married off. So she escapes and runs into this woman who is on her way from the southern part of England, where the Normans and Saxons live.
Yes.
And I think the woman is actually a Saxon, but she's going to marry one of the Danes because her father wants this alliance so that, to save his lands. And so she becomes her best friend and her companion, and Cerridwen does. And so that talk about not being able to pronounce names. I can't pronounce the Saxon names in that book.
That's fair. That is very fair.
Yeah, but it's a wonderful series, and so I started reading other ones that were all in the Middle Ages, and I learned that the Middle Ages were not wet and dank and dark as I was thinking of them. They were. There was vibrant trade, and which is you kind of get that from the Cadfael series too, and so yeah.
It's also definitely not as white as some people would want us to believe.
Exactly.
So much cross-cultural knowledge and experience. And I love that. I love finding out that people have always been people. And while some people will be unpleasant, others will go, new knowledge and new people. How cool. I want to learn from you.
Right. Exactly. And yeah, trading far away too. Some of them, they went far away for their trade and brought back all kinds of interesting ideas. And so that was very interesting. So, but I read lots of different genres. What are your favorite genres?
Oh gosh. So I'm a very solid fantasy fan. When you're raised on Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, you can't really not be. I have recently got into a very specific style of romance writing. Don't get me wrong, I love a trashy romance as much as anyone else, but I don't necessarily go to them. But it's more like I don't know how to. There's not really a genre name for it, but there are certain types of romance novels which are, while the conflict is around a romance, it's more about the people, about them growing as people. So I find those stories very interesting because I'm very firmly of the opinion that companionship, it's not your goal. It's a nice thing to have, and your partner is like it's like you're in a big battle, like a medieval battle. Your partner will always have your back. So you've got your shield, they've got the sword, or either way round, whichever, like maybe both. Maybe you're a whirling dervish of death, who knows? But that's how I see partnership. And so I love romances where they both grow as people, as individuals, and as companions. So to me, so I really enjoy that. I like a little bit of science fiction as well. I really enjoyed Lindsay Ellis's book Axiom's End. Again, very character driven. I enjoy all sorts of different genres as long as it's character driven. I enjoy it.
Yes, me too. The only ones I'm not really big on are the horror, lots of gory horror.
Oh yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Or with characters who don't learn anything.
Oh yeah, if you learn nothing, what was the point of the story?
Really.
Although to be fair, even though I don't naturally, so I get frightened very easily, and I'm not ashamed of that. I used to be like, oh, I'm a coward. No, I am sensibly afraid of death. So I am. But I'm trying to not dismiss the horror genre because I think a lot of talent and hard work goes into creating these scenarios. So for instance, I read Pride and Prejudice and Zombies is a solid mix of romance, comedy, and horror. So I can tolerate a bit of horror as long as there's something else for me there. You know?
Right. Well, I've only read one Stephen King book so far.
Ooh, which one?
The Stand. It's a huge, huge book. But in the 80s or 90s, they did a mini series of it. And so again, I read the book. And it has some horrifying things about it. I know that people say he is a horror writer, but I didn't find that book like that.
No.
And so at some point, I need to pick up more of his books. I'd like to read The Green Mile, which is not a horror book at all, and The Shawshank Redemption, and some other ones. But yeah, he does have some that are kind of horror-y, like Pet Sematary, and probably I'll never read that.
I would argue that Stephen King, he might not be technically the best author in the world, but I would say he is a talented author. The way he toes the line between just frightening enough to get you interested, but never horrific enough to get you to put down the book.
Right, exactly.
And I also admire the way he takes feedback. I really I respect that he will change his views and his outlooks. I also, as somebody, again, I work with a mental health charity, I can very much appreciate him working through his trauma through creativity. So, for instance, The Shining is famously about how he worked through it helped him work through his alcoholism. And so if him writing these stories helps him process very difficult feelings, difficult emotions, then more power to him. You know, I think creativity is a very good tool, and I think Stephen King exemplifies that. If you can use it to help yourself recover, go right ahead.
Well, and I think that's partly why some visual artists paint the way they do, or, you know, make sculptures or whatever it is that my husband's a potter. But so they might do pottery to help them with their mental issues as well. And musicians, oh my goodness.
Oh yeah.
Musicians do that all the time. So yeah, I am a creative person. I've always been that. And so sometimes it's hard for me to understand that, like, the mathematical mind or the scientific mind that is all about logic. I do have a quote that I always put on the bottom of my show notes. I'm going to pull it out here. It's by Roger C. Schenck, and he's a cognitive scientist. And he said, humans are not ideally set up to understand logic. They are ideally set up to understand stories. And so people who think that they're completely logical and not emotional, I don't understand them, or I feel sorry for them, maybe, because to me, emotions are so important.
Yeah, there's working through one of the most helpful things that somebody said to me in terms of emotions is you can feel an emotion as hard as you want, and nothing bad will happen. So I used to be terrified of the emotion of anger. I thought that, and it's the way, to be fair, it's the way anger is depicted in media. It's like people snapped and they hurt someone. It's like, that's not really how that works. You can anger the emotion and anger the action are two completely separate things. So you can feel angry with somebody and it's okay, as long if you don't act on it, nothing bad will happen. So it's totally safe for you to go away and process that feeling. Same with sadness, even happiness, extreme happiness. It'll be okay. You can feel those emotions, let your body process them, and you will be safe.
Yes. And maybe the lashing out is unprocessed emotion.
Almost certainly. And again, that's another wonderful thing stories can do. They can help you process your emotions.
Oh, yes. Because I listen to podcasts where people are talking about the books they read and how it helps them emotionally, not just, they learn things. Like I said, I learned a lot about the Middle Ages from reading these historical novels, but they also they learn how to process their own emotions, or through the characters, they do that. And I think that's so valuable. So valuable. Yes.
I definitely agree with you.
Oh, Rosie, this has been so much fun. I wish we could talk for hours and hours and hours, but I know you have to go eat dinner. So I am so grateful for you saying yes to be on my show. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Lucinda. This has been an absolute pleasure. And like yourself, I could talk about this for hours. And it's been so exciting to speak to somebody who's, if not more passionate about stories than me.
Oh no, I'm not sure I could be more passionate than you, but maybe matching passionate.
Hooray!
Yes. So I'm encouraging people to go listen to Rosie's podcast, Yorick Radio Productions, because I'm going to be on there, but also I've listened to some episodes and it's really fun.
Oh, thank
Really
you
fun.
so much. And yes, we had a wonderful discussion. So your interview is definitely one to tune in for.
Thank you. That was fun.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you again, Lucinda. This has been an absolute pleasure. And I'll definitely be sending my listeners your way.
Okay, good. And I will do the same for you. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you like what you heard, please share it with a friend and give us a review on your favorite podcast app. It will help people find us. You'll find the show notes for this episode at my website, Sage Woman Chronicles at sagewoman.life. You can leave a comment there. And remember, as Philip Pullman said, after nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Until next time, this is Lucinda Sage-Midgorden. Thanks for listening.